I still remember the sound of the courtroom that morning. Not voices, not footsteps, but the silence. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, the kind that makes you feel smaller without anyone touching you. I sat at the long wooden table with my hands folded in my lap. My fingers were calm, even though my heart was not. I focused on the smooth surface of the table, the tiny scratches left behind by other people's battles. I wondered how many stories had ended right where I was sitting. Across from me sat my husband, Grant White. He looked relaxed, confident, like this was just another meeting he expected to win. His suit was perfectly pressed. His watch caught the light when he moved his hand. That watch had always been his favorite way of reminding me who had the power. He leaned toward me slowly, close enough that I could smell his cologne. It was sharp, expensive, the same one he started wearing when he stopped coming home early. "You'll never touch my money again," he whispered. His voice was soft, almost polite, like he was doing me a favor by telling me the truth. The words landed heavy inside me, like a door closing. Behind him sat his mother, Lydia. Her posture was straight, her face calm. Pearls rested neatly against her neck, just like always. She wasn't angry, she wasn't nervous. She was certain that this moment belonged to her family, not me. A few seats away sat another woman, young, quiet, watching. She didn't look at me with hate, she looked at me with curiosity, like someone watching the end of a story they already believed they understood. Everyone in that room was waiting for something, a tear, a reaction, a mistake. But I didn't give them one. I stayed quiet, because silence had taught me more than words ever did, and because beneath my hand rested a plain white envelope they knew nothing about. People often think silence means weakness. They think if you don't fight back right away, you've already lost. That's what Grant believed about me. For years, he believed my quiet meant I agreed, that my calm meant I accepted things the way they were. He never understood that silence was where I learned to survive. Once, my life looked perfect from the outside. We lived in a large house near the river, the kind of house people slowed down to admire. White walls, tall windows, a front yard that always looked neat no matter the season. People used to say I was lucky to have a husband who provided everything, lucky to never worry about money, lucky to stay home. They never asked if I was happy. Before I married Grant, I had a life that felt like mine. I taught marketing at a local university. I loved standing in front of a classroom, chalk in my hand, watching young people slowly realize they were capable of more than they thought. Helping them find their voice made me feel alive. Grant used to come to my lectures sometimes. He would sit quietly in the back row, smiling proudly when students asked questions. "You're so good at this," he'd say afterwards. "I love watching you teach." Back then, his words felt warm, supportive. When we had our son, Ethan, everything changed slowly. So slowly I didn't notice at first. Grant suggested I take a break from work. "Just for a while," he said. "You've earned it." I agreed. I wanted to be present for my child. I trusted my husband. At first, it felt like peace. Then one paycheck stopped coming, then another. My return to work was delayed, then dismissed. "You don't need the stress," Grant said. "I can take care of us." The words sounded loving, but something about them felt heavy. My income disappeared into our joint account, then my spending limits changed, then every purchase came with a question. "Do you really need that? Why not wait? Let's talk about it first." Slowly, my independence faded. I didn't notice it disappearing, I noticed it missing. Grant's mother, Lydia, visited often. She moved through my home like it belonged to her. She had a way of speaking that sounded kind, but left no room for disagreement. "A good wife supports her husband," she would say gently. "Men carry heavy responsibilities." I nodded. I wanted peace. I thought that was what love looked like. The night everything changed was my birthday. Lydia came over with a small gift wrapped neatly in silver paper. Inside was a gift card. She smiled proudly as she handed it to me. "Something practical," she said. Minutes later, she turned to Grant's assistant, Claire, and placed a diamond bracelet around her wrist. The bracelet sparkled under the dining room light. Grant smiled at Claire. Not the polite smile of a boss, something quieter, something familiar. I caught our reflections in the mirror on the wall. Lydia glowing with pride, Claire shining with confidence, and me fading quietly into the background. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not all at once, just enough to let the truth in. That night, I lay awake listening to the sound of Grant's breathing beside me. The house felt large and empty. I realized then that perfection in our home was never love. It was control. After that, the house felt different. Grant stayed out later. His phone was always face down. Doors were closed more often. I told myself not to imagine things, that good wives didn't question, that trust meant silence. Then, one evening, I saw the papers. They were lying on the dining table, left behind carelessly. Just a stack of documents. Business things. One number caught my eye. A transfer amount that didn't make sense. When I asked Grant about it the next morning, he didn't even look up from his coffee. "It's an investment," he said calmly. "You wouldn't understand the paperwork." That sentence stayed with me. You wouldn't understand. That night, while he slept, I took photos of the papers with my phone. My hands didn't shake. I felt calm in a strange way. The next day, I looked deeper. Public records, online reports. That's when I saw Lydia's name. Not as a witness, not as an observer, as an approver. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, not fear. Awareness. Emails followed. Drafts Grant never sent. Messages between him and Claire. "The transfer is complete. We'll move the next set Monday." I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. I expected to see panic. Instead, I saw focus. That night, I called someone I trusted, a former student, someone who had once sat in my classroom, listening as I told them knowledge was power. He listened quietly as I showed him the documents. "This is serious," he said finally. "This isn't just wrong, it's federal." And in that moment, I understood something clearly for the first time in years. My silence had protected them. Now it was time to protect myself. After that night, nothing felt the same. The house was still the same size, the walls were still white, the river still flowed quietly outside our windows. But I was no longer living inside my life. I was watching it. I moved through my days carefully, like someone walking on thin ice. Every step mattered now. Every word. Every pause. Grant noticed something had changed, but he couldn't name it. "You've been quiet," he said one morning, folding his newspaper. "Just tired," I replied. It was always a safe answer. Inside, my mind was busy, awake in a way it hadn't been for years. I replayed conversations, remembered details, listened more than I spoke. Silence was no longer something happening to me. It was something I was using. I didn't rush to expose him. I didn't confront him. I waited, because waiting had taught me where the truth liked to hide. The meeting with my former student happened in a small office downtown. Nothing fancy, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a window that looked out onto a busy street. He studied the documents quietly, too quietly. Finally, he leaned back and took a breath. "If you move forward with this," he said gently,
Your life will change." I nodded. I already knew that. He explained things slowly, carefully, about federal laws, about laundering money through charities, about how dangerous it could be if the wrong people realized what I knew. "You'll need protection," he said, "and help." I remember staring at my hands. They looked steady, stronger than I felt. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said. "I'm doing it because I can't pretend anymore." He nodded once. That was how I ended up in a quiet FBI office a week later. The FBI office didn't feel dramatic. It felt tired. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the smell of old coffee and paper. No movie-style intensity, just seriousness. Two agents sat across from me, one man, one woman. They spoke calmly, clearly, no pressure, no raised voices. They explained the risks. If Grant found out, things could turn dangerous. If his family suspected me, they could try to destroy my reputation. If I changed my mind halfway through, I could lose everything. They asked if I understood. I did. They slid a document across the table, a cooperation agreement. I stared at it for a long moment. I thought about my son, about the woman I used to be, about how small my world had become. Then I signed. The pen scratched softly against the paper. It sounded final. When I stood up, the woman agent handed me something small, a pen, plain black, slightly heavier than normal. "Keep it with you," she said. "Use it when you can. Don't change your behavior." Don't change your behavior. I almost smiled. My behavior had been quiet for years. Going home that day felt strange. The house looked the same, the driveway, the front door, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Grant was already home, standing in the kitchen. "Where were you?" he asked, too casually. "I met an old friend from work, the university." He smiled in a way that used to make me uncomfortable, but I never understood why. "That place never suited you. Too many opinions." He kissed my cheek. I felt nothing. That night, I placed the pen in my purse and went to bed. I didn't sleep much. Living a double life is not about lying all the time. It's about listening. I listened when Grant talked on the phone late at night. I listened when Lydia visited and spoke about family loyalty. I listened when Claire laughed too loudly at Grant's jokes. I recorded conversations when I could, in the kitchen, in the hallway, in the car. Sometimes my hands shook afterward. Sometimes they didn't. Every week I met quietly with an agent. I handed over files, audio, notes. They never rushed me. They never praised me. They treated me like someone doing something necessary. That helped more than they knew. At home, Grant became more confident. He believed I was breaking. "You seem lost lately," he said one evening, swirling his wine. "You should let me handle things." I nodded. Inside, I noted the date, the time, his tone. Lydia began visiting more often. She would sit across from me at the kitchen table, folding her hands neatly. "You look thin. Stress isn't good for a woman." I smiled politely. She spoke about the foundation, about how important appearances were, about how damaging rumors could be. "I know you'd never hurt the family," she said softly. I looked at her and thought about her signature on those documents. I said nothing. My son, Ethan, started noticing the tension. He was old enough to sense when things weren't right, but young enough to still believe adults knew what they were doing. "Are you and Dad okay?" he asked one night. I hesitated. "We're just figuring things out," I said gently. He nodded, but his eyes stayed worried. That night, I cried quietly in the bathroom, not because of Grant, because of the distance I had to keep from my own child. Silence protects, but it also costs. By the 6th week, Grant changed. He checked rooms more carefully, lowered his voice when he spoke on the phone, locked his office door. One morning, I noticed something strange. His watch sat on the dresser. Grant never took it off. I picked it up, my heart beating slowly but hard. When I pressed a small button on the side, a red light blinked. Recording. My hands went cold. He was listening. I placed it back exactly where it had been, the same angle, the same spot. That day, I didn't record anything. That night, I warned the agents. Their response was calm. "We're close," they said. "Stay steady." Lydia came by unannounced 2 days later. Her perfume filled the house before her voice did. She studied my face carefully, like she was searching for cracks. "You've changed," she said. "Quiet women usually mean trouble." I smiled politely. She spoke about dignity, about how scandals destroy families, about how women are remembered. I nodded politely. Inside, I thought about the envelope waiting in the future. The pressure grew heavier. Grant stopped sharing details. Claire avoided eye contact. The house felt watched. Still, I stayed calm, because panic makes mistakes, and I could not afford one. One night, Grant leaned close to me as we stood in the kitchen. "You still don't understand the rules," he said quietly. I looked up at him. "I think I do," I said softly. He laughed. That night, I recorded one of the most important conversations yet, and I knew we were nearing the end.
By the time the 7th week arrived, I no longer counted days. I counted moments. The sound of Grant's footsteps in the hallway, the pause before he answered a phone call, the way Lydia's eyes stayed on me a little too long. Living carefully had become natural, like breathing quietly in a room where someone else was sleeping. The house felt smaller now, not because the walls had moved, but because secrets take up space. Every room carried a kind of tension. The kitchen, where I smiled and nodded, the living room, where Grant pretended nothing was wrong, the bedroom, where silence lay between us like a third person. Still, I stayed calm, because calmness was the only thing I had full control over. The email arrived on a Thursday morning. It looked ordinary at first. No warning, no subject that stood out. Just a message from Claire, Grant's assistant. I almost didn't open it. Almost. The email was short. JW Panama Transfer Confirmation. Please review before Monday. Attached were several files. I opened the first one, then the second. Then I stopped breathing for a moment. It was all there. Account numbers, transfer dates, shell companies, amounts that made my stomach turn. Everything connected. Grant, Lydia, the foundation, and Claire. She had sent it to the wrong JW. I sat very still at the kitchen table. The morning light came in softly through the window, landing on the floor like nothing had changed. Outside, the world was normal. Cars passed, birds moved along the fence. Inside me, something settled. Not fear, finality. I forwarded the email to the agents with one short message. This just came in. Then I deleted it from my inbox and closed my laptop. My hands didn't shake. I made coffee, fed the dog, waited. The response came faster than usual. "This confirms everything," the agents wrote. "Court date is locked." I read the message twice. Then I sat back and let out a slow breath. We were close. Too close to turn back now. That weekend, Lydia hosted what she called a reconciliation dinner. She said it was time to bring the family together, to clear the air, to remind everyone of what mattered. Grant agreed quickly. I did too. The house filled with people that evening. Friends, business partners, people who had once toasted our marriage. I moved through the room quietly, refilling glasses, smiling when spoken to. Claire arrived late.
She avoided my eyes. At one point, she pulled me aside near the hallway. Her voice trembled. "You read my email," she whispered. I looked at her calmly. "There are a lot of people with my initials," I said softly. "I'm sure you sent it to the right one." Her face went pale. She nodded quickly and walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd and felt something strange. Pity. She had mistaken power for safety, just like I once had. Later that night, I walked past Lydia's office on my way to the bathroom. Her door was slightly open. I heard her voice. Low, sharp. "If she opens her mouth," Lydia said, "I'll handle it." My hands moved without thinking. I pressed the button on the pen. I stood there quietly, listening. Grant sent something in response. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. Fear had entered the room. When I walked away, my legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. That recording sealed everything. After the dinner, the house returned to its quiet state, but it was a different kind of quiet now, the kind that comes before a storm. Grant stopped pretending completely. He no longer asked about my day. He no longer shared plans. He watched. One night, as we stood brushing our teeth side by side, he spoke without looking at me. "You wouldn't survive on your own," he said calmly. I met his eyes in the mirror. I already am, I thought, but I said nothing. Ethan started asking more questions, not loud ones, careful ones. "Why is Grandma here so much? Why does Dad look angry all the time?" I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes they're afraid of fixing them. He nodded slowly, absorbing more than I expected. That night, he hugged me longer than usual. I held him tightly, knowing how much of this he would never fully see, and how much I hoped he never would. The week before the hearing was the hardest. Every sound felt louder, every glance felt heavier. Grant barely slept. Neither did I. The agents told me to prepare. Not emotionally, practically. They said, once this happens, there's no going back. I already knew. I packed a small bag, important documents, personal items. I removed the wedding photo from my nightstand and placed it in a drawer. Not with anger, with closure. The night before the hearing, Grant stood in the doorway of the bedroom. He looked tired, older. For a moment, I saw the man I once loved. Then he spoke. "You think you're smarter than me," he said quietly. "You're not." I looked at him calmly. "I don't need to be smarter. I just need to be honest." He laughed. That laugh followed me into sleep. The morning of the hearing, I dressed simply. A gray dress, no jewelry, no makeup beyond what was necessary. I wanted to look exactly like what they expected. Small, plain, unthreatening. The white envelope waited in my bag. It felt heavier than paper. When we arrived at the courthouse, reporters filled the steps. Cameras flashed, names were called. Grant walked confidently, shaking hands. Lydia walked beside him, chin raised. I followed quietly. No one noticed me. That was fine. I didn't need them to notice me yet. Inside the courtroom, I took my seat. The room smelled like polished wood and cold air. Grant leaned towards me. "You'll never touch my money again," he whispered. I didn't react, because the truth was already seated in the room, waiting.
The courtroom was already full when we walked in. Every seat was taken. Reporters lined the back wall. People whispered softly, like they were inside a church. The sound of shoes against the polished floor echoed as we moved forward. I felt every step, slow and steady, like my body already knew this moment mattered. Grant walked ahead of me, shoulders straight, confident. His lawyers followed closely, carrying thick folders filled with words meant to erase me. Lydia sat behind him, holding her handbag tightly in her lap.
Her face was calm, but her jaw was set. She believed she was untouchable. She always had. Claire sat 2 rows back, her hands folded tightly together. She looked smaller than usual. The confidence she once wore so easily was gone. I took my seat quietly. No one looked at me. That was exactly how they wanted it, and exactly how I needed it to be. The judge entered, and the room stood. She was older, with silver hair pulled neatly back, and eyes that had clearly seen too many versions of the same story. When she sat, the room followed her lead, settling into silence. Grant's attorney stood first. He spoke smoothly, calmly, confidently. He talked about Grant's success, about his hard work, about how he built everything himself. Then he spoke about me. She has no career, he said plainly, no assets of her own, no meaningful contribution to her husband's success. Each sentence landed carefully, like a stone placed on my chest. She is simply seeking financial gain. I didn't react. I had heard these words before, in different rooms, in different forms. The attorney finished and sat down. Grant didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He believed he had already won. My attorney stood slowly. He didn't rush. He didn't argue. He simply walked to the front and placed a white envelope on the judge's desk. The sound it made was soft, but the room changed. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "this is a supplemental filing submitted by my client. It has been reviewed and verified by the United States Attorney's Office." Grant turned his head sharply. Lydia leaned forward. Claire froze. The judge lifted the envelope and opened it carefully. She began to read. At first, her expression didn't change. Then her brow furrowed. She stopped, looked up, then looked back down again. The silence stretched. Finally, she let out a short, sharp laugh. Not amused, surprised. "Oh," she said quietly, "this is very interesting." Grant stood halfway out of his chair. "What is this?" he demanded. The judge raised her hand. "Mr. White," she said calmly, "according to federal documentation, your wife has been cooperating with the FBI for the past 2 months." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, cameras clicking wildly. Grant's face went pale. Lydia stood up. "This is a lie. My son is being framed." The judge's voice cut through the noise. "Sit down, Mrs. White." The courtroom doors opened. Federal agents walked in, badges visible. Claire let out a small cry and covered her mouth. Grant turned toward me, his confidence gone, replaced by something I had never seen before. Fear. "You don't know what you've done," he hissed. I met his eyes. "I know exactly what I've done," I said quietly. "I told the truth." The judge continued reading. Shell companies, illegal transfers, falsified documents. She read Lydia's name aloud. Twice. Lydia's face went white. Grant lunged forward, but the agents were already there. Handcuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed. I stayed seated. Still. Silent. The judge struck her gavel once. "This court is adjourned," she said firmly, "and justice will proceed." Outside, cameras surrounded us. Questions flew. Grant was led away without looking back. Lydia screamed his name. Claire was escorted out separately, crying. I stepped outside into the sunlight. The air felt different, lighter. 3 weeks later, the house by the river was quiet. No voices raised, no doors slammed, just silence. But this silence felt kind. The FBI called that afternoon. The agent said, All illegal assets have been seized. Your legitimate property remains under your control. Justice, written in paperwork and signatures. Ethan came to see me that evening. His face was serious, older. I thought Dad was right, he said softly. I thought you were wrong. I took his hands. It's okay, I said. Truth takes time. He nodded. I believe you now, he said. I held him close. That night, I stood by the window, watching the river move slowly under the moonlight. The house felt like mine again, not because I had won, but because I had survived.
The day after the arrests, the house by the river felt foreign. It was quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. No commands, no forced smiles, no invisible rules dictating how I moved, how I spoke, how I breathed. I walked through the rooms slowly. The kitchen, the living room, the bedroom where so many nights had been spent pretending to sleep while my mind raced. I touched the surfaces lightly. I noticed small details. The way sunlight hit the windows, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of the river flowing past. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. The FBI called that afternoon. All illegal assets have been seized, they said. Your legitimate property remains under your control. I listened carefully. I didn't say much, because I already knew. The world I had once feared losing had returned to me, legally, cleanly, rightly. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, my voice, my freedom. Ethan came to visit later that day. He was quieter than usual, thoughtful. His eyes held the weight of someone who had been forced to unlearn what he had believed about his father. "Mom," he said softly, "I thought you just wanted money, but now I don't know what to think." I took his hands gently. "It's okay," I said. "Truth doesn't need an audience. It stands on its own." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I believe you," he said. We sat together by the window, looking out at the river. The city lights reflected in the water, calm and steady. I realized then that healing wasn't just about surviving. It was about being present, fully, without fear. And I finally was. The next weeks passed slowly. I cleaned the house at my own pace. I cooked what I wanted. I laughed quietly at small things. I didn't have to hide. I opened a small consulting business, White Consulting, helping women like me take control of their finances, helping them find independence, teaching them how to protect themselves and their choices. Ethan joined me in outreach, quietly, thoughtfully. His presence reminded me that life could continue without fear. The wedding photo was gone from the wall, replaced with a new one, Ethan and me standing by the river under a bright sky. I smiled at it every morning. No one else mattered in that picture. Not Grant, not Lydia, not Claire. Just the two of us, free to breathe. One evening, as I stood on the porch, I received an anonymous email. "You've made enemies," it said. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Enemies reminded me that I was alive, that I had stepped back into the world, stronger and quieter. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to prove anything. Because freedom doesn't shout. It moves quietly like the river outside my window, steady, persistent, relentless. Grant once said I would never touch his money again. He was right. I didn't. But I touched something far more valuable. My life, my voice, my choices, my peace. The sun set slowly over the river. I stood on the porch, wearing a white shirt and linen pants, feeling the wind move gently through my hair. The camera of life seemed to pull back. The house, the river, the city lights, and me, alive, free, whole. No anger, no triumph, only quiet understanding. I had lost years to control, fear, and silence, and yet I had found myself again. The lesson I carried with me was simple. Silence is not always weakness. Silence can be strategy. Patience is not cowardice. Patience can be power. Truth may take time to surface, but when it does not need witnesses. It does not need applause. It only needs courage. And sometimes that courage comes quietly. I walked inside, closing the door behind me. The river continued its slow, steady flow. The lights of Nashville glimmered softly, and I smiled, because at last the story was mine to tell.